Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. It's now December 2023. Another year is just about gone by, and I'm out here in the shop. Christmas Eve morning, I want to get this video out right quick. And what we're going to do is take a little walk down memory lane on some old equipment that I've used in the many years ago. But first I want to say all my major projects that I was working on for the past few weeks is done. The roof on the house is done. I've poured the engine out of the exterior and started tearing it down, went through it, did a lot of videoing on that, got it rebuilt, got it back in, drove it 450 miles since it's been put back in the car, and yesterday did the first oil change. I wanted to change the oil before 500 miles. You know, use break-in oil, and then got the oil change yesterday, and it's running pretty darn good. I'm right happy with it. On the time of, while I had the Nissan tore down, you know, I was driving the Mustang, which doesn't get driven that much, and about middle way through the process of the rebuild, the Mustang put me down. Fuel pump in the tank went out, so had to drop the tank, put a new fuel pump in it, and put that back together. So that wasn't too bad, but it's kind of bad when your backup breaks down. But you know, that's life. That's the way things go. But anyway, as a lot of you, or some of you may know, back in the day, growing up, I was into shortwave listening, and all kinds of equipment I used back then, listening to shortwave. Even before I got my amateur radio license, I used to go out and participate in field day with a friend of mine, Doug Beckwith, N4ZZT. He was mostly one of my biggest mentors in radio. I met Doug, I don't know, when I was 16 years old, and we just hit it off, and you know, throughout life stayed in touch with each other. He moved away, then came back, and we got more heavy into different things. But every day at field day, I would go out and we would set up VHF equipment to communicate with the old satellites. And you know, it started out with the old Russian satellites, RS-10, 11, RS-12, and 13, and we went on from there. And then when AMSAT Oscar 10 and 13 was launched, we just had a ball on field day with those two birds. But let's go ahead and get on into what we're looking at today, and we'll go from there. So I picked this thing up back in the late 80s, and this is the old KLM Multi 2700, and this radio was used for satellites, especially on the Russian amateur birds. Now this radio does FM, wide and narrow, sideband, CW, and AM, and it transmits on all those, on the whole, you know, VHF amateur spectrum. But what made this radio so unique was that it has a 10-meter receiver built into it that's used off of this VFO. And what you would do when you want to communicate with the Russian satellites, you would hit this Oscar button, and you would transmit on VHF and listen to the downlink of the satellite on the 10-meter receiver that was built in with a VFO over here. Now those satellites were linear transponders, so tuning back and forth to find yourself just didn't have no automatic tracking where it automatically set your downlink to your uplink. So you had to spin the knob to find yourself. And Doug owned this radio years ago, In fact, I think he bought it new, and he made this knob in the machine shop where he worked at and put on it so he could spin the dial faster. And that's made out of steel, and it's weighted. Now over the years it has put a toll on that front bearing on this VFO knob, but it still works back and forth. But this radio spent its life on field day. Didn't care if it was rain or whatever, it was there, and we were making contacts with it. I later purchased the radio from Doug because he went to the Yau FT726, so I purchased this radio from him, and we still used it a lot at field day even after I purchased it. But I used to take it and listen to it all the time myself when I was home. Later on, I had a 22-foot travel trailer. It's an Airstream, completely gutted and built into a ham shack. And I had this thing out there, and me and my wife had left and went to go get some dinner that night, and a thunderstorm came up, and lightning hit the tower, and it completely destroyed everything I had in the shack. This radio was also affected, and what it did was blow the power supply completely out of it. You can see here on the inside the case where the explosion occurred, and that was back here in the power supply area. And the back of the chassis back here has got some burnt spots in it, as you can see here. Well, later on I happened to find this one that was listed as non-working. So I pulled the transformer out and the supply board, because this is the supply board that was in this one, and the one that was in the original that I had has a hole blowed in about 1.5 inches in diameter in this area. So it took out this whole board and burnt the whole side of the transformer. The transformer is sitting in this radio, and you can see where it burnt down into the transformer, and it took some of the windings out also when that happened. But I bought this radio just for a parts rig to fix this one, and unfortunately I have never gotten to fixing this radio, but I do have the parts to do it, so that is on the list to restore this radio back. Now you might say, why didn't I take the other radio and fix it? Well, the other radio, the guy said it had a lot of alignment issues and would not align, probably capacitors. But this radio had a lot of sentimental value to it, and that's why I wanted to restore it. Now you see it looks bad, it's very dirty, crusty, there's some rust on the case, but this thing has been in storage since about 1995 or so. But my goal is to get this radio back up and running like it used to be. I mean, even if I don't use it, I like to get it back together and get it back working. So here on the back of the KLM, you can see this little piece of hardwood has been mounted here, and there's a couple of BNC chassis connectors and a BNC connectors that was put in, and this is in line going straight to the receive of the main board, and it bypasses the relay and everything. And what Doug had was this preamp that was mounted on here, and these cables connected to it, and that put a preamp in the front end of the radio. And this is a think gas fed transistor that's in it. But you know, I've never tested this preamp after that. In fact, I took it off many years ago and I stuck it in the box because I figured the radio at that time was just, you know, not cost worthy to repair. But now, since it's got, you know, sentimental value, it's going to get a complete restoration. But I've always wondered if this preamp even worked anymore. Okay, I got the preamp connected to the spectrum analyzer. I'm going to feed 144 megahertz at minus 20 dBm. And I got the spectrum analyzer set up. And as you can see, there's a very small little blip there because the preamp is not powered up. And I just want to see if this preamp has any gain whatsoever to it. So I'll flip the power supply on. And look at there. That thing survived the lightning crash. Unbelievable. So this old preamp is still working. Even after the radio being destroyed by a lightning hit. Now back, I can remember when that lightning hit my shack, I had handhelds sitting in chargers, like some Motorola and some standard handhelds, and one of the Motorola's was blown completely out of the stand. It was just like a drop-in charger. It had blown it out of the stand, and the stand was just completely destroyed. It was all burst open and it was bad. I lost quite a few radios that was in there, along with a computer setup that I use for WWIV. If y'all don't know what that is, that was bulletin boards back in the day. That was before internet. We had bulletin boards set up, and I had a computer set up with 2 phone lines connected to it, and had a 6 CD changer, had a lot of ham radio files and stuff in it, and it was on the WWIV network. And it took that computer out also. But yeah, it's good to see that this preamp still works. So I got a 20 dB attenuator in line, plus, you know, we're getting lost on this cable. Let me go to peak. And that's showing about minus 22.4 dBm. So I would say this preamp is working perfectly. So after the KLM incident, it was a little further on in life, satellites changed. The old Russian birds went silent. It was a new era of satellites introduced, and now 432 megahertz has been introduced to the satellites instead of the old 2 meter up, 10 meter down from the Russian birds. And also back then they had on one of the Russian birds, I think both of them, RS 10, 11 and 12 and 13, had a 21 megahertz downlink. But now we were getting into 432 megahertz, and finding 432 megahertz equipment was just about next to nothing. Now, as being a technician class with code, we were not allowed to transmit on 432 megahertz. That was not part of our license class allocation. But with the ruling that they had, you could transmit up on 2 meters and you could hear your downlink back on 432 megahertz. Now you're saying, buddy, that's an HF rig. How do you monitor 432 megahertz with that. Well, this is something else that Doug passed down to me. Was this 432 megahertz single sideband transverter, and it was made by Microwave Modules out of Liverpool, England. And as I say, this is a transverter, not a converter. So that means you could take a 20 megahertz signal and apply it here to the input, and you can apply the output here of the 20 megahertz signal, and you would have 432 on this side, so you could receive and transmit on this with an HF rig. So you just connect this up, and that turns your HF rig into a 432 megahertz transmitter and receiver. Now there's also some mods in here. You can see it's got two switches to go high and low. This is 432, and flip up, it'll go up to 435. So it covered the whole 70 centimeter band with just this transverter. And this is what I used for a while, even at field day. And later on I had swapped this out, so this is, you know, low power, to a Tentec 2510 transverter. I'll pop a picture up of that just above up here somewhere so you can see what it looked like. But I later on sold that when I got into some other equipment. But this is what we used during field day at that time. And Oscar 7 was up, and then later on we had Oscar 10 and Oscar 13 up. But these did a great job, no problems at all. Alright, I got the transverter powered up. We see we have a 28 megahertz input cable, and that is going over to the Kenwood TS2000, and it's set for 28 megahertz. And our signal generator is on 432.1 megahertz, and we're on FM. I got the radio on FM. And we should be able to hear a signal if this thing is still working. And there it is, full scale. So the transverter is working. Let's go to 432.2. And we should be able to find that signal on that radio. There it is on 28.180. We go to sideband. But that is how the old transverters worked. You can take any 28 megahertz signal and apply it to the radio, and you have 430 to 35 megahertz. There's a series of crystals in here that can be swapped out by these two switches that would give it the different frequency ranges. But it's good to know that this old thing still works, because it's been around for a long time, and this is the first that's been tried in years. So after playing around with transverters and, you know, a little bit limited on what it would do, I'd happened to run across this from a local ham over in Wilmington, North Carolina. And he had mess with a lot of VHF, UHF stuff. But this is the it's the KLM. It's the Echo 70 centimeter, 432 megahertz single sideband CW transmitter or transceiver. And I picked this up. Cost quite a bit of money back then for this old radio, but there's a switch on the back that changes it from 432 to 435. So this radio worked with all the latest satellites that was up there. And I had paired this with the Yau FT2726R all mode VHF radio, and that gave me a good little unit to could either uplink on 2 meters or uplink on 432 megahertz or 435 megahertz, which was the one that was needed. But yeah, this was a nice little gem, and the frequency has even been expanded more than what's in it to work some of the other modes that was up here. On one side of the radio, I believe it's this side, there's actually a bank of crystals been added in here, and there's a switch, and you can switch between those crystals to expand the frequency even more. So in 1983, Japanese company Yau came out with the FT726R, and this was one of the first, well, this was the first dedicated satellite rig that Yau come out with. And this radio here happens to have 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and 6 meters in it. There's modules inside of it. Now, I've worked on a few of these on the channel years ago, so some of y'all might remember these. In fact, we worked on a couple of these on here. But after my friend Doug, he passed this one on to me. He bought this thing back many years ago, and he had passed this one on to me. So it was kind of an upgrade from the old 2-piece units I was using. And I later on found a 6 meter module and put in it, because we got into doing a lot of 6 meter work. My first 6 meter radio, which is in there on the shelf, but that's for another video, was a homebrew 6 meter single sideband transceiver. But man, this thing was a blast on field day. You know, having one radio with everything built in it. This old Vocom RF Corporation's amplifier was converted and used on it, and it worked fairly well on single sideband. I also have somewhere here in the shop is a little small advanced receiver research preamp that was connected to this, but I have no idea where it is in the shop. It's here somewhere, but I do know that it had quit. I went to a different preamp and used it for a while, but it just didn't have the quality of that advanced research receiver preamp. But this was a nice radio, and you can see she was rode hard, put up wet. In fact, all these radios that you've seen today have been through the mill, doing field days in the rain. You can see chassis has rust spots all over it. It's kind of bad back here on this corner, but the inside of the radios are good. But you know, that's the price you pay on doing field day stuff, is equipment getting damaged from rain or whatever. In fact, this whole unit was knocked off the table one night because somebody walked through watching, and we used heavy gauge coax going to the antenna systems, and he caught the antenna wire and pulled this radio right off the table. Luckily, the way it landed, it didn't put any dents or nothing in it, but You know, you always have to worry about stuff like that. It got some battle scars, let's put it that way. But this radio has quit working. It hasn't been powered on now in years, but when you do power it on, it comes up with an E on the display, which is usually power supply issues. So I'm pretty sure it needs a complete recap and alignment. In fact, I have a second one of these that works fine, but this was the original one that I had that came from my buddy Doug. But yeah, we had a blast with that radio. So the next to the last radio is that I acquired this one, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, was the FT736R. Now this came out in the late 80s and ran into the 90s, and then it was discontinued. But this was the Cadillac of all the satellite radios I have ever owned. And this radio, when I got it, it was bought with a issue what needed to be repaired, and that was a power supply issue. And I got the radio in and repaired it and used this thing quite a bit on AO7. It was just a sweet working radio, and what I liked about it was the way it tracked. It tracked beautifully, and it also worked with Ham Radio Deluxe, where you could let the computer do all the tuning and stuff that was required. That's all nice, but you know, I'm an old school guy and I like tuning stuff myself when I'm playing with the radio. But yeah, this radio, even the guy that had it had a 1.2 gigahertz module for it, and he kept that when I bought it from him. So at the time, I think I gave like $450 for this radio, non-working, 10-12 years ago. So they kept the value pretty good. But this radio works fully functional. Everything on it works, but this radio's got a lot of age on it, and it really needs to be gone into and do a complete recap and alignment on it. As you can see here, it's got the CAT system and computer automated technology, so you know it'll work with Ham Radio Deluxe and different programs of that. But yeah, the tracking on this thing is just wonderful. When you go into the SAT mode and you set it up and you align the receiver to your downlink, it was spot on, and it would as you go through, it would track without having to go and retune. The 726 wasn't like that. You had to constantly tune both transmit and receiver, you know, and adjusting for Doppler shift. But man, this thing here was just so much fun to use. And when Doug gave me that 726, this is the model that he had went to, was the 736R. Now, I did not get that radio. He had that radio until the day he passed away. And but he had quit using it, and I guess he was going to sell it or whatever, and he went on to the next radio. But I used this radio for years. In fact, I used it a couple of years ago, and it's been sitting silent on the shelf because I spend so much, most of the time I'm in the shop, I'm working. I'm not getting time to talk on radio, which that's changing. That is definitely going to change. I'm setting up another studio in the house, and as soon as I get that done, I'm going to have a place to put some radios so I can get back on the air like I used to be back in the day. But I've never taken this radio out on field day, and that's why it looks so much better than the other ones. Plus it's one of my, say, newer units that I had. So yeah, I've never ran it through field day and getting it damaged. It's dirty, it needs a good clean up, And like I say, it needs a cap job, because these power supplies are notorious for going bad in these things. They run a little bit hot, and it needs, it needs some maintenance done to it. So the last radio, which I picked up a few years ago, is the Kenwood TS2000. Now, I'm going to tell you, that is a excellent radio for satellite communication. You see, it's got the big button right here for satellite, and you would turn that on, and you can work all through all your satellites with it. Now, I do not have the 1.2 gigahertz module that goes in this, but this radio does cover HF, VHF, UHF, and 6 meters. So yeah, that's an excellent radio. The only problem with that radio, I think I mentioned it before, is that it has the bipolar output board, PA board in it, and those transistors are just hard to find. The transistor I had picked up out of China, people tell me on HF that it sounds like it's motorboating a little bit, and I don't think that transistor is completely right, or there's something wrong with it. Maybe if I could have got 2 of them, but they only had 1, so there's not a matched pair there. But the same guy that made the PA boards for the TS940 is also working on a PA board to go in these TS2000s out there, because there's a lot of them out there with bad finals in it. Now, some of the later TS2000s, they have put MOSFET transistors in, and they had changed that circuit board design. So to do that, you would have to have that circuit board to go in there, but I do not have access to it. Kenwood's no longer making it, no longer supporting it. But it's bad that such a nice radio has a problem finding transistors in it. And I have looked and looked to see if I could find some, or find somebody that had one that was damaged or whatever, to get the PA out of it, but I have not to this day run across that. So guys, I hope y'all enjoyed that little trip down memory lane doing the for satellite equipment. I do have a bunch of antennas that I would like to show and display, but just don't have time today to get into it, and it's really cold out there. It's in the low 30s out this morning, so yeah, I'm not going to be doing that today. I have one UHF antenna. It's a 64 element with folded dipoles on it. Now, that antenna was built in the 70s by Doug, and that thing is, you have got to just about have it pointing directly at the satellite. Now, it's pretty much useless for using today. You can forget it with the FM birds. It depends, you got to point it right at the satellite, and you got, remember them satellites out there traveling at 17,000 miles an hour. Now, back when AO 10 and AO 13 was at, them things were high Earth orbit. They were in one spot for a long time, so you didn't have to move the antennas, and that's what that antenna was designed for. But it worked great with those. For these satellites today, nah, pretty much forget it. So the antenna just made its home on top of the shop here, and it's been sitting up there for years, but I would like to pull it out and go through it and make sure it's right. We have a couple of homemade Texas potato mashers, and they're omnidirectional stationary antennas. One for VHF, one for UHF. They work pretty good for the FM birds. It's just that they got about a 30-degree angle on them, like this. So they're not good for horizon to horizon, but for good overhead passes, they do fairly well. Now, anytime that we ever used these, especially on field day, we went manual on the antenna positioning, especially back in the day, even AO7, that bird's up at about 17 minutes doing a pass, but there was no problem moving the antennas manually tracking it. That was just some of the things we do. Like I say, the old birds, high earth birds, you just stuck the antenna and then every 15-20 minutes just move it a little bit, track with no problem. But these birds today, they, you know, so you really got to stay on your game with catching them, especially if you got a ground station, you know, just inside and your antenna's outside. Then you need something like the Yaesu azimuth elevation antenna to keep up with it. But we're going to be putting together something here in the future, because I want to get back on the satellites as they come over and do a little more communication on this. I used to love A07, and I've got many hours logged on A07, and I'm going to be putting together a new system to track the satellites with, as far as the antennas are. You know, automatically moving the antennas is okay, but I don't mind pushing some buttons and keeping up with the satellites. So we'll be coming up with something that I used to use 2 Alliance U100 rotators, one, you know, sitting this way and the other one stacked sideways. The problem with the old Alliance rotors, you know, they click style. When you're sitting there and you're trying to get the elevation right, that little pointer will get off, and next thing you know, your antennas are pointing straight up and you think they're pointing at a 30-40 degree angle, but they're not, because that old manual system just couldn't keep up with the movements. Anyway guys, we hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane. As you can see, I got a lot of stuff that still needs to be restored and worked on here in the shop. Just my own equipment. I can spend years doing that. So I want to say Merry Christmas, and I hope you all have a wonderful and prosperous New Year. And please leave your comments down below. Hit that like button, that always helps. And if you haven't, please subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye now.